Hi and welcome to this talk on the dead zone. The main test for you in this talk is not to go to sleep. Because usually as soon as you start talking about the dead zone, everybody starts acting it out. It's always a difficult time, or always a difficult subject because of that. Now essentially the dead zone is just a place of great defense for us, where we've defended ourselves from our feelings, from what's going on inside us, our unresolved issues, that we've distanced ourselves from our lives, from the people around us, from our partners, even from our children. And that distance creates the deadness. So typically the way through the dead zone is our willingness to take an emotional risk, to give ourselves, to be real and authentic, and to commit. Now the extent to which we don't do that, in general, you know you're in the dead zone because you're bored, there's no longer any enthusiasm for the things that you were enthusiastic about. When you go to work, it feels boring. You come home, it's probably even more boring, and there's nothing really going on in your life. Now typically at some stage, people in a relationship or in their lives just feel, when they've been in the dead zone for a while, they just feel so dead, they finally have to do something dramatic to break out of it. Like they'll throw their job in, or they'll go to Australia and open a bar on Bondi Beach. This will give me a sense of life or purpose. But it won't. Well, it will for the first few weeks, but you'll slip back into that same old pattern and get back to that place of deadness, that place of inner defense, where we've defended ourselves against our feelings and what's going on inside us. Now, the dead zone is the biggest trap in our minds. Typically, as we evolve and we go through the other areas on the triangle, there'll be like one major trap in each stage. But in the dead zone, there are 4 major traps, and we just need to be aware of them. And the first one is our roles.
Yes, and where we're in a role, it's almost like we've taken on a way of behaving and being that actually isn't ourselves. It's almost like what we say, we're being a cardboard cutout and presenting ourselves in the terms of a role. And the problem with something like a role, and that's, we develop roles from about 18 months old onwards. We develop ways of behaving and being that actually aren't truly us, aren't who we really are. And what it always blocks is our inability to receive. We're unable to receive all the reward that comes back to us is given to the role rather than to us, to ourselves. And that's why we feel greater and greater feelings of deadness and nothing really much happening in our lives. That's where we are typically always coming from a role, being in a role.
Yeah, a role is actually when we're doing the right thing but for the wrong reasons. That's the essence of a role. We might be working hard or whatever it is, but it's a role. It's something, as Julie said, we created a long time ago, and all the reward is going to that. Now now as well as roles in this stage, we also have rules. Now typically rules are also another form of defense. We create rules in order that we protect ourselves from past pain. When things have gone wrong in the past, instead of healing it and dealing with it, we create a rule that covers it up. Now typically in relationships between you and your partner, you might have at least 40 different rules, only 20 of which you've told them. The other 20 they're supposed to know if they really love you. Now, sooner or later your partner will break all your rules. They have to, because what you're saying here is what's creating the deadness in a rule is that you have this buried pain, and you're making your buried pain more important than your relationship. And when you do that in a relationship, it will just create deadness. Now the other aspect in this stage, roles, rules, and duties.
And that's where we feel obliged to do things, where we feel an obligation. where we're doing things by rote, really, because we feel a sense of obligation and duty to do things. And again, it isn't where we're coming from a place of true giving, where we're really truly giving ourselves. It's coming from a duty. And of course, that deadens relationships, that deadens our lives.
And that's the first trap in the dead zone: roles, rules, and duties. The second one is family dynamics and the Oedipal Electra complex. Now, you've probably heard it said between your friends at some point when someone's talking about their partner, and they'll say, yes, my wife talks to me exactly like my mother did, or my husband sounds like my father. And all of a sudden you go, oh my God, I've married my father, I've married my mother. This is all family dynamics. And all the guilt that comes up, all the issues out of our past that comes up, that creates a distance then. Because, the unresolved issues of our past have now been projected and transferred into our present relationship. And we need to learn to go back and start cleaning this stuff up.
Yeah, a reason why people stay in the dead zone for so long is because basically we're really frightened of going back into our past and healing some of these family dynamics we have. And one of the big dynamics that keeps us stuck in the dead zone is the Oedipal pattern, or the Electra pattern.
This Oedipal Electra complex is the reason why about 85% of relationships fail. It sets up, all the deadness, it sets up all the betrayal, sets up the authority conflict, and this is something that goes well back into our past. In our relationship, our first significant relationship with the parent of the opposite sex. Now, many people say, oh, well, no, we've escaped this trap. But if you're having deadness in your relationship, if you're fighting for no reason at all, if you're having triangular relationships, if you're having no relationship, then these are all indicators that we have got caught in this particular part of the trap. Now, obviously in the dead zone, when relationships in the dead zone, this is a time when people have affairs, and when they start going out and having the triangular relationships. All our triangular relationships are based on this particular trap. The other thing that sets up in here quite strongly is that whole thing about dilemmas, because that's another thing we get caught in the dead zone, where we go between, should I go this way or should I go that way? Should I be with this person or should I be with that person? And these dilemmas all come out of our family patterns and our Oedipal, traps. And some people stay in the dilemma for the rest of their lives. And so we need to learn how to get past these dilemmas, how to get past these family patterns. And then we get into the next level, which is underneath all this, which of course is that most destructive force in all relationships, competition.
Competition, which comes from, again, from broken bonding in our families growing up. We come into our families, and where there's broken bonding, we believe there isn't enough love to go around, to be shared or to be given and received in the family, so we have to start fighting for it. That is the basis of competition. It's built on a feeling of lack, built on scarcity. And in the dead zone, competition is extremely subtle. It's not an all-out power struggle like we described earlier on with the power struggle stage. It's, where we really are winning and losing, and we're playing a very subtle game of it.
Now, competition destroys relationships. You can't have, two people in a relationship where one is competing with the other, playing win-lose, and there'll be this level of happiness, because that's essentially what competition is. We play win-lose. So anytime your partner or people around you are failing you in any way, one of the main things that's going on is we're competing with them. Now, the interesting thing for us after years of work is recognizing that people that reckon they're not competitive are usually the most competitive people. And so, sooner or later your partner starts failing you, or the people around start failing you, then you're competitive, you being the winner. And competition is a worldwide problem. as so many business people go, well, we have to compete to succeed. And you go, no, there are other ways of doing it, through cooperation and mutuality and giving your best, not playing the essence of competition, which is win-lose. Now, the next step after competition, of course, is the whole reason for the dead zone, why there's so many traps, is the fear of moving forward. The fear about our lives and who we are and who we come to be. So the fear of the next step.
And with that fear of the next step, there's also other fears as well. There's fear of success and there's fear of intimacy. It's a funny old thing, but we're more frightened of that, and that's what keeps us in the dead zone than we are of moving forward. And the other really interesting thing about the dead zone and why we stay a long time in the dead zone is because we're resisting a lot of our unconscious mind, a lot of some of the deeper, more meaningful things that want to come to the surface from our unconscious mind. Dead zone defends against the unconscious. And it's when we turn the corner into partnership out of dead zone that we start to truly experience life and recover some of the gifts that we buried years ago in our childhood. So commitment and moving into partnership, coming out of our fear of the next step, our fear of intimacy, and moving forward in our relationships and in our lives opens the doorway to the unconscious mind.
Yes, quite often, people ask, how do I get out of the dead zone? Well, obviously there's, commitment will help, and being authentic and, giving yourself true giving, all of those things help. But one of the quickest ways to do it is to take an emotional risk. It's like to give yourself in an area or a level that you haven't been doing that in the past. Is to really, take a risk, put it on the line, typically an emotional risk, and that'll move it forward. For instance, in your relationship, one of the things is when we're caught in the dead zone, it's like you have all these things that you're thinking about your partner, but you've never said that to them. Now, what that thinking does is that actually creates a distance, because that thinking has an effect. So one of the quickest ways out of the dead zone is have the courage to say what you're thinking. Because to get out of where we're caught in the dead zone is we're not congruent. There's part of us is thinking one thing and another part of us is acting in an opposite way. We are not congruent. To get out of the dead zone, become successful, have great relationships, and to be intimate with your partner, we need to win back the congruency, which is to say our heart and our mind needs to go in the same direction. Now, in the dead zone, we have dissociated from our hearts. That's why we landed up there. We stored all these issues inside. We stopped giving ourselves. We stopped being courageous, and we became defended. That's the dead zone. Now it's the willingness to let go of those defenses, to get back into your heart, to get to know what's deep inside you, and make that congruent with what you're thinking. And that will lead you to success and happiness and great relationships.